As I get older, I find it increasingly more and more difficult to be excited for new video games. And part of that could be me just becoming an old grumpy man, but I think the main thing is that AAA games these days are becoming really boring and basically the same. Because of that, it's just not as fun to look forward to release dates. But luckily for me, I love indie games. And there are a lot of indie games doing cool and exciting things. And this time of year is called Steam Next Fest. And during this time, lots of indie game developers come together and release preview demos, as well as trailers and other stuff like that, for this big event where everyone can come in and try out these new games and see if it's something they want to wishlist and be excited for. So with that, here are 10 Steam Next Fest games that I think are worth keeping an eye on. Okay, I'm gonna start with a kind of big one. It at least feels a little bit big to me because I follow a lot of game developers online, and this is one that seems to pop up a lot. I'm also a big 3D platformer fan, so I tend to be drawn to those types of games. But this game is called Ruffy and the Riverside. This is a 3D platformer where you're playing as this fluffy guy named Ruffy, who is made out of paper, and you are 2D in this three-dimensional world. And not only is this interesting from an art style perspective, but just they do some cool stuff with being able to pull materials off of different elements and throw them onto different objects, like making a waterfall made out of leaves to stop flowing water and allow you to climb up it, stuff like that. It seems to be playing with this idea of everything being made out of different materials and elements and stuff like that in a really cool and interesting way. The game has always been on my radar and something I've been paying attention to online. And honestly, I had no idea that it had this kind of element grabbing and throwing mechanic behind it. Everything I've ever seen were just like little videos of Ruffy running around, jumping around, and basically showing off the art style and how cool the world looks, which it does look really cool, but it's nice to see that this isn't just another indie 3D platformer, but one that is bringing an idea to the table like this element switching and throwing. One thing I do really want to touch on are the visuals and just the appearance of the game in general, as well as the music. The music is really good. It's very unique, and everything just, it has a vibe to it that just kind of feels cozy. It definitely is pulling from that like Banjo-Kazooie style feeling that you would get. The music is kind of more R&B version of that, at least that's what it feels like to me. And so it's just a very unique game that I'm definitely going to be keeping my eye on. So I wanted to basically get a feel of it, see if the mechanics and the movement felt good, which for me, movement in a 3D platformer is huge. So it did feel good, and it was good enough for me to put on the wish list, and definitely good enough that I think it is worth taking a look and seeing if this is the type of game for you. Okay, jumping to the complete opposite end of the gaming spectrum. The next game is called Nine Kings, and this is a strategy auto battler game. So if you are into things like Super Auto Pets, Balatro, even backpack battles, that kind of thing, this is one to keep an eye on. And basically you are given a grid that you are placing down these buildings and units, and how you place them down affects how effective they will be. So if you put like a farm next to a group of units, the farm is going to increase the number of units each turn, that kind of thing. And each round you are able to pick a card, which a card is what allows you to put down those units or those buildings. So you'll get a card for like a castle or an archery tower or a group of knights, that kind of stuff. And you'll also get cards for like buffs to your units and stuff like that. So you get to pick one of those each round, and you get to place at least one down each round. Basically, put unit on grid, put building on grid, put them down in a way that they can make each other stronger, and then if you get a duplicate card, you can level that unit up and fight enemies automatically in between rounds to make it through the whole like 15 rounds or whatever it is. So if you're like me and you like those auto battler games, they're very satisfying, and the strategy behind just optimizing your build to make it through is really fun. This one has a really cool vibe. I really like the pixel art. and I'm excited to play more of it and get sucked more into this gameplay loop. Nine Kings, I'm very excited for. This is another one that I wish listed as a fan of auto battlers. So if you're a fan of anything from Balatro to Super Auto Pets, this is one I would keep an eye on as well. This next one is for the Mega Man fans out there, and it's called Advent Neon. And honestly, it's like a mix of Mega Man and Sonic the Hedgehog. And this one is definitely very early on. I did enjoy it, but the art was a little all over the place. The animations of fighting and doing moves in the game were pretty good. I didn't love the character portraits, and honestly, the game does get a little button mashy. Like, I didn't feel like I needed to strategize what moves I was using to make it through the stages. There are some cool, like, honestly, like Bayonetta Witch Time, where if you dodge at the right time, it slows things down and you can counter with a different move. And the moves are really satisfying. Like I said, and the animations look really good, but the level design itself and the complexity of the combat honestly does leave a little bit to be desired. It would not surprise me if this was being made by a smaller team, which is not a bad thing at all. It just needs a little touching up here and there. And while the game does show a lot of promise, it is hard to recommend this game necessarily when other games very similar to this, like Gravity Circuit or Berserker Boy, stuff like that exist and are out there right now that you can play that are just kind of better than this is right now. Regardless, it was still fun to play, and it's always interesting to see these games in this infancy state and kind of think through yourself, like what could be worked on and what needs touching up and stuff like that. So while this game shows a lot of promise, and I could honestly see it getting as good as those other games like Gravity Circuit, Berserker Boy, that kind of stuff, it definitely needs a little more time in the oven, and it's not done yet, so there's no use necessarily critiquing it for that point. This is one I'll be keeping an eye on. I am probably not going to buy it right away if it comes out in a similar state to where it is now. I don't think that's going to happen. There was a boss fight that you were like running with the boss fight, and it reminded me a lot of the Sonic Advance games, and that was really cool. So hopefully they can kind of spin that into a cool aspect of this game. So yeah, that's Advent Neon. If you are a Mega Man and Sonic fan, could be worth looking into. This next one's called Aethermancer, and this is a roguelike or roguelite for our Pokemon fans out there. This game is really cool. The music and the animations and the pixel art and stuff like that are really, really good in this game. I really loved the vibe, and I could definitely see this being something that you could get sucked into that gameplay roguelite loop of optimizing your team and getting that perfect run. It was a lot of fun to play. It didn't hold my attention as much as some of the other roguelites on this list that I will be talking about, but this was definitely good enough for me to wish list and keep an eye on. I'm not the biggest turn-based battle fan, but I do really like Pokemon for some reason. This game does fit into that. It has a bit of like deck building card game mechanics too, with like a mana system on whether you're able to use certain moves and you generate that mana turn by turn and stuff like that. So it is strategic in its own way. It's not just a ripoff of the Pokemon battle system. And something I thought was interesting is your team heals in between rounds or battles, but there's like a curse that gets applied to your team as you go on. So even though your health for the most part gets refilled after each battle, you could have a curse of like 2 or 3 or 4, and that increases over time. So that's basically your max health minus this much. So as you go on, you gotta keep an eye on that so that your max health doesn't get so low that you're not able to complete these battles. I thought that was an interesting way to do it. There is a poise system or a way to stagger the enemies, and that also leads into the way you capture the enemies. So by using certain elemental attacks, you can stagger an enemy, and then your little Aethermancer, whatever he's called, he's basically able to capture the memory of this creature, which isn't capturing them to immediately use. It's kind of like you're registering them to a log And then when you get to certain moments or these monuments in the game, you will be given a random selection of enemies that you've added to this log, and you can then summon them to be on your team. And your team can have up to 3, it seems like. So definitely an interesting aspect there where you want to register everything to your log, but that doesn't necessarily mean that's your team that you're running with, which I actually really like, because I love catching every single Pokemon in a Pokemon game, and that collect them all aspect is something that has made Pokemon so successful. And obviously, if you're resetting your run every time you die, you're going to have to start your team over. So that collect them all aspect just isn't really worth it once you've got the 3 in your team, if it wasn't a log system like this. So the way they've done it, I think, is actually really smart and makes the catching creatures and collect them all aspect work really well. Because I don't think I mentioned it, those creatures you've added to that log carry over between runs. So you really are creating this big collection of creatures that you can carry on throughout your entire time playing this game. There were a few little things just user interface wise that were a little confusing, like when picking which of the creatures to summon from that log when I got to that monument, I wasn't able to view my existing team, which at that point I had 2, and I wanted to make sure I had a good assortment of the elemental attacks. And to be fair, I could have just been confused as to where I could see my team, but as far as I could tell, I couldn't. And I ended up picking one of the little creatures that had moves that my other creatures had. And so I probably would have picked a different one had I known that. The other thing for me was the storyline was just kind of I mean, roguelike stories are usually not that great in the first place, unless you're Hades. So, you know, nothing really to write home there. The story just kind of felt like it was just really wordy. Like, it kept saying things that I felt like I'd already been told, either by a tutorial or by a different NPC. The NPCs are all really cool looking. Your main character kind of looks like he's from Dead Cells, so that was kind of neat. And I ran into a witch frog, and her name was Lily, because frogs like lily pads, so that was hilarious. And yeah, they're cool. So, but for the most part, as far as first impressions go, it left a good one, and it's definitely something that anyone who's into creature collecting, somewhat deck building, turn-based, more so just like turn-based, but with elemental weaknesses and stuff to inflict staggering, that type of combat, definitely should keep an eye on it. The artwork and music, like I said, is all really good. So UI could use a little bit of work. Otherwise, Aethermancer, great game, and definitely worth keeping an eye on. Oh boy, okay, Soul Sesto. This one is probably the first one that I have conflicting feelings on. The most standout feature of Soul Sesto is for sure the visuals. It is a very unique art style. It's pretty grotesque. There's some horror vibes there. Just little goofy guys in the background. The shopkeeper's like peeking up over the table and he like laughs at you in a goofy way. The artwork of your character when he goes to attack something that you got the probability incorrect and now he's going in to do the damage that's going to kill him. Like, there's just this uneasiness to a lot of the artwork that is really cool, and it's very unique. And the gameplay itself is really cool. Like, there's nothing inherently wrong with the gameplay. It's basically a game of probabilities and ruling out whether it's worth trying to attack an enemy in this line with a 25% chance that you'll attack an enemy that will take some of your health, and the 75% chance you'll be fine. And then within that 75% chance, maybe you'll regain some health. Maybe you will get a treasure chest. And it's laid out on this 4x4 grid, so you can select each row, and each row starts with 4 enemies. And as you defeat those enemies, obviously the grid goes from like 4 enemies to 3 enemies. So at that point, you have a 33% chance for each of the enemies to run into. So if when you first attacked it, you missed that enemy that would have done damage to you, now there's a slightly higher chance. So do you want to move to a different row? Well, maybe this row has 2 enemies that'll do damage to you and 2 places that won't, but one of those 2 places will heal you. And as you do damage, you work up this number that lets you go to the next floor, which will completely reset the grid. And each character that you play as has a different movement skill. So the character I was able to play as in the demo, so normally you are only able to select rows, but every 4 attacks, his movement skill procs, and you're able to select columns instead. So there's all of these little bits and bobs of probability that you're able to keep in the back of your mind and make your way through the amount of enemies you need to get through to get to the next floor to reset the grid. And you also have some items that will do things that you can use at any point. You just know that they're limited and you can only refill them when you get to a store, which stores are one of the floors you can get to basically in between those grid floors. There's things that can happen like stat boosts, shops. There was one that was like a praying floor that didn't seem to do anything in the demo. There's these teeth floors, which are your build floors basically. Like this one is gonna make you this much less likely to get this type of creature, but this much more likely to get this type of creature. It's going to change how you play and change the probabilities. It might make it so when you get a healing item, it does damage to everyone on the floor, that kind of thing. But yeah, it's this roguelite based on the idea of just probabilities. And from a baseline, that's cool. Like playing it, I can totally see why people would get really into this. It's not for me. I got out of it what I wanted, and I don't think I need to play the full game. The thing is, that would be awesome if that was it. But there are just certain aspects of it that I was like, man, this could have been so much better. And the first thing I'm gonna touch on is a me thing for sure. The menus have this mouse tracking effect to them. When you are selecting your character, when you're in the main menu, it's there. So when you're moving your mouse around, the whole screen's kind of wobbly. And this effect on the menus genuinely took away from the experience for me. As someone who gets motion sick through certain visuals, this effect applied to menus that you are trying to target on to like start game and like read things and move over to the character you're trying to select that you're looking at, and as you move it over, the character just starts moving unnaturally away. It just like, it genuinely, even though I was on the menus for such a short period of time, it made me slightly motion sick. It wasn't enough to make me stop playing the game, but it was enough that I was like, why did they do this? Like, at least put an option in the options menu to turn it off. Like, if they need it there, just let me turn it off. Random rant about motion sickness thing aside, the other thing is just from my limited time playing it, I hope in the full release, there is a bit more you can do with your build. Now, I know there's at least going to be more characters, so this from a baseline is definitely going to be improved upon in the main game with whatever build you're creating through items, artifacts, and like these teeth. And so right now, the teeth in the game didn't feel like they affected the game enough for it to be addicting. It was mostly like this. So like enemies have an attack stat and a magic stat, right? And so it'll be like, okay, well, attack stat enemies are gonna be less common, but magic stat enemies are gonna be more common. So in that case, you just pick the one that your character has more attack for, you know? And or it'll be like, okay, you're gonna earn less gold, but you're gonna see more healing items. And those are cool as like the super ultra common ones that you can add to kind of tweak your build. But I never ran into anything that felt like it really changed the way that I was playing or looking at these grids, where the Jokers in Balatro can change the way you play the game so much that you are building entirely different hands of cards. Where in this game, you're still doing the same thing every time, you just might get healed a little bit more, you know? So I hope that as you continue on through the game and you play more of it, that those things are included, that makes each run feel different. And there are things in the game, like I said, the prayer pool, stuff like that, that are not implemented yet. It's pretty early on. There's only the one character that I played as. So there's definitely plenty of room for them to do this. And for all I know, they are doing that. As far as standing out visually in a world of extremely unique art styles in the indie space, it does a very good job in that regard. But for those of us who get motion sick, I hope they at least add a toggle to their options to turn off that motion. All right, so I didn't want to pick any games that I only had negative things to say about. I know I have some critiques for these games, but I know they're all made by indie developers just trying to do their best. So I try to find things that are at least interesting to talk about in the way that they did good things, and some things may have struggled a little bit. But Catris was really not good. This game looked really cute when scrolling through the Steam Next Fest page. And honestly, I should have just like looked at more screenshots or something. I probably just looked at the first banner and I was like, Catris, this is cute. It's a puzzle game, cats. I'll download it. It's cute, low poly art style. It kind of just feels like one of those dumb free to play mobile games that have like one idea. And the idea for Catris is you've got a bunch of little cats sitting in the world, and keep in mind this is a low poly world that has no animation. There are no bones in any of these 3D models. They are just models sitting there, so nothing is moving. You click with your mouse on the cat to drag, and each cat has a different jumping arc. And you need to get the cats into like the trash can or the bathtub. And it's so dumb. Like, man, maybe it gets more interesting as you go on, but it's like click and drag to move the cat close to the chair so it can jump on the chair so then it can get close to the trash can and jump in the trash can. Probably don't keep an eye on it unless clicking and dragging on cats to make them bounce just a little bit over and over again sounds interesting. Even the UI looks like it's a mobile game. Like it looks like it's a cheap free-to-play mobile game. And I'm really sorry to the developers. I know everything has effort put into it. But while Catris was not the cozy game I wanted it to be, Whisper of the House was the cozy game I wanted it to be. And I don't know what I wanted it to be. I went into this one completely blind because a friend of mine recommended it to me. And what I got was a super cute isometric pixel art Animal Crossing Happy Home Designer. The art is really cute, and there's a little world for you to explore as you decorate your house and like someone else's apartment and their rental home. And it's just kind of like this cute little cozy community version of Animal Crossing Happy Home Designer where you go into different people's houses and just decorate their house. And in some cases, do a little bit of cleaning up to make things look good. It's a little bit like the indie game Unpacking, where unlike Animal Crossing Happy Home Designer, which gives you this huge list of all the furniture items in the world and you can decorate the houses however you want, this game has a little robot guy named Mark who will give you each furniture piece one at a time, and you decorate the house how you want it to be based off of these pre-existing lists of furniture pieces, which is an interesting take on it. And honestly, I kind of like this more just because when making houses in Animal Crossing Happy Home Designer, I had a tendency to lean on my favorite items, but the limitations of having to put every item down that is on this list creates some creative opportunities for myself that I may not have put on myself otherwise. Like in one of the apartments I designed in the demo, she had a lot of plants and you had to move the plants around and hang them on shelves, and she had like this little plant display, and so you had to make sure you had room for all of the plants. And even though there were less of these in that same house, she had a lot of plates and I didn't know what to do with all the plates. So I just hid one of the plates behind one of the plants, speaking of which, because since it was isometric, you can't like rotate the camera. So no one knows that plate's there. So now it was just less plates as far as she knows. So that was cool. The art style is also just really cute. There's like a little Shiba Inu, and the furniture is just cute. The pixel art's great. I do love that isometric style. It works really well for this type of game. It does feel a lot like the game Unpacking, just instead of unpacking this same person's room as they move through their life, you have a little world to explore. You have your like house you can decorate however you want, and you're going to different people's houses to decorate in different scenarios that way. And then there is that cleanup aspect, which is definitely less of a thing than the decoration aspect. Like in one of the houses I had to clean up the bathroom a little bit, but that wasn't like the focus. Like it was just there, you just clicked on them and cleaned it up. So the game starts by telling you that you're starting a housekeeping service. And so I expected there to be more cleaning, and there's not a ton yet, which is honestly fine. The decoration aspect is the more fun part for me, honestly. And this one is a game that I'm very excited for Steam Deck players. The demo says there's no controller support, but there is controller support when you play it. I mean, it's not the best controller support ever. Like when you're running around the world and stuff, it works fine. When you're decorating houses, it's just analog stick to move the cursor, which isn't ideal. It would be nice if there was a way to like snap to the grid. Like even if you just use the D-pad to snap to the grid and the analog to move the cursor. But right now the D-pad moves around the UI, around the outside of the screen, which is fine. But you know, you could get to that by pushing one of the face buttons and then just using either the D-pad or the analog stick. And I think that would work better personally. Just a thought. But yeah, this is for those cozy game fans out there, for anyone who likes organizing and decorating things, and especially for people who liked Animal Crossing Happy Home Designer, as well as the DLC for Animal Crossing New Horizons. This is for sure a game you should keep an eye on. And since it does indeed have controller support, for those of you looking for a relaxing game to play on your Steam Deck right before you go to bed, this is definitely going to scratch that itch, and it is one that I wish listed very quickly. Okay, so Mega Bonk is awesome, and I can't believe no one has done this yet. But it is just the simplest idea, and it works great. Basically, take Vampire Survivors, or any of those survivor bullet hell games, make it 3D with like a PS1 art style, and that's it. That's the game. And it's got this unique, like quirky art style, like the knight's name is like Sir Uffy or something like that. But for the most part, like the game is literally just Vampire Survivors in 3D with like a 3D camera in that kind of movement. Like there's a jump button because it's in 3D, but for the most part, everything, like the way items work is the same, the way upgrades and stuff work is the same. It's just a quirky, another Vampire Survivors type game in 3D, but that opens up some opportunities that are just kind of exciting to see. Like a lot of the enemies can launch you flying out in the distance. Like there's these big guys that'll blow up, and if you're in their explosion radius, you go flying. And if you fall off ledges, you take fall damage. Like I said, you can jump over enemies. It just adds this level of complexity that's not a lot of complexity, but just enough that makes the loop of Vampire Survivors honestly even more fun. Like I love Vampire Survivors, but I'm so excited for Mega Bonk. Like this game is so fun. And I can't tell from the little I've played yet if it's gonna have the same like mixing of items together that Vampire Survivors does. I hope it does, because that's one of the most addicting aspects of that game. But as far as like upgrades go, getting the rarities and the chests in the overworld, and fighting bigger enemies and like little events happening in the world, and getting the same item over and over again until it becomes crazy overpowered. Like that super satisfying loop is so well done in Mega Bonk in what is there already that man, I can't wait for this game to come out. I wish listed this one right away. This one's great time. Me and my friends have already played the demo for like hours. Like it's really good. If you like Vampire Survivors, you should for sure play Mega Bonk. Oh, Demon Tides. Okay, there's a lot of good to say about Demon Tides. I am very excited for Demon Tides. I loved Demon Turf. It is one of the only 3D indie platformers, I should say, that has a moveset that is deep and comparable to the type of freedom that you can get from a Mario 3D platformer, specifically Sunshine 64 and Odyssey. It's not quite the same, but I mean, it does have a lot of things carried over from those games, like triple jumps, side flips, stuff like that. And those are my favorite types of 3D platformers. If you have a killer moveset, that is 100% like I'm there. Like a killer moveset in a 3D platformer is gonna be a good time, no matter what. And there's not a ton to say about Demon Tides besides the moveset is there. It is complex enough that I can just see so many cool things that you'll be able to do to get through these levels. It feels like if you played Bowser's Fury in the 3D World pack on the Switch, it feels like they took that and expanded upon that idea, gave it a Mario 64 type moveset and this cute kind of quirky art style, and they just ran with it. And I am all here for it. I have got it wishlisted. I'm really excited to download it day one. Well, there is one thing that was a little annoying as I played it, and honestly, it did kind of affect the whole experience. Unfortunately, like, there is so much good about Demon Tides. Like, so much good about Demon Tides. The move set from a baseline is amazing. The level design feels fantastic. The art design, as far as the characters go, like how they look, these little 2D animated like cutscenes and stuff like that, all great. The colors, everything, the world, it looks so good. But the animations are really not that good. Like, it hurts to say because it's one thing that just pulls the whole game feel down a notch. And it went from being like, man, this is gonna be the best indie 3D platformer ever, is gonna stand above all of them, and this is what everything should be aiming for, which it is still so close to that. But then you play it and all of the animations are so linear, and the animations behind your moves just feel so stiff. And man, I just want them to play Jak and Daxter and look at how Jak has so much good squash and stretch in all of his jump animations and all of his spin and the attack animations, and just shove it all into Demon Tides. Just give it all the squash and stretch. Like, it does not have enough exaggeration in its animations. It just doesn't feel as good as it could. Like, the moves themselves are great. The animations around them are just not there yet. Like, they're fine, but they're not good enough for how good the rest of the game is. Like, honestly, that's the thing. The rest of the game is so good that the animations not being that good stands out above everything else. And as I played, I got used to it, and I was able to look past it a little bit, but it could just be so much more. I am an animator, and I do animations for games as well as other things, so it could be more sensitive to this than others, and I am also very picky about my 3D platformers. I'm a huge Mario 64 guy, so I'm just like dead center on the guy that's gonna complain about the animations for this game. But I can't say enough good about the rest of the game. Like, keep an eye on it for sure, and it is still a demo, so I hope these are just like the early stage animations. And the only reason I'm so set on this is because the game is so close to being everything I want from a 3D platformer indie game. Otherwise though, holy cow, keep an eye on Demon Tides. This game looks amazing. I follow the developer on all the social medias. He does amazing work. He's so fun to keep an eye on, like all the stuff he's doing. He posts a ton and it's very interesting. So I hope the best. I know this demo is doing good and I hope it does even better. I just really hope the animations look good too, because I want everything and I'm a selfish gamer. On to the last game, which for me is tied with Mega Bonk for the game I'm most excited for, probably. This game is called Haste Broken Worlds, and I'm very excited for this game. The artwork is very cute. The character portraits that are in the demo are very unique and have such a cute little painterly style. The world itself is very colorful and fun to rush past as you play the game. And this, once again, is another roguelite type game, but this one takes inspiration from, if you ever played the mobile game Tiny Wings. In Tiny Wings, you were a bird going up and down these little hills. And when you touched the screen of your phone, you dived down fast. And the point was to dive down fast on the downhill slopes. And as long as you timed it correctly, you would hit the slope just right and your speed would build up and you would continue building more and more speed to just launch yourself flying as far as humanly possible. And the point of this game was to make sure you don't slow down, because if you slow down all the way, then you can't make it all the way across these hills and you'll plummet into the ocean. This game takes that idea, makes it 3D, and makes it so much cooler that I'm very excited for it. It's another game that is just a very simple idea, but something that I cannot wait to play more of, because I could 100% turn my brain off, watch YouTube or Netflix or something, and just play a ton of this game. Basically, every level is made of hills, just like Tiny Wings, and you are this little messenger girl, and it's the same thing. You push the button to dive into the hill. You do have this like little surfboard that you can activate sometimes to go over like lava and stuff like that, so there is a little more complexity there. But the complexity in this game comes from the fact that it's 3D, so you're going to be dodging things as you go through the hills. So you're going to be trying not to run into trees. Later on, you're going to be avoiding enemy attacks. It just gets chaotic in a way that is so fun, and it's so fast paced, and anyone who loves those mobile games or even things like Sonic the Hedgehog, like, you should play Haste Broken Worlds. It is so satisfying to play. The music is very fun. Like I said, the art looks great. The demo ends with this really cool boss fight where, for the most part, as you're playing through these levels, you just start at the beginning and go to the end, and then you move to the next level and you stop at these like little rest points in between to get your little roguelite like boosts to your speed or like items to heal yourself as you go through, that kind of stuff. But once you get to the boss fight, you're going around an arena, so you need to turn like sharp and come back to hit the enemy, and you need to dodge his attacks as you're doing it, and it just adds even more depth to this simplistic idea that, once built upon, just becomes so satisfying to play. So I know it's silly to say the games I'm most excited for out of the games I've played here are honestly some of the most simplistic ideas. They're the ones that have that replay value that you can just sit down and play a game for 20 minutes and turn your brain off. That being Mega Bonk and this Haste Broken Worlds game. But man, sometimes those are the best. Just sit down and play these games that you can play for hours on end doing the same thing, but it's just so fun to do. So if you haven't already, I would try out Haste Broken Worlds and definitely add it to your wish list. So those are the 10 most interesting Steam Next Fest games that I played personally. I know there's a ton out there and I didn't get to play them all, which is exactly why I'm making this video. So for those of you who didn't get to play all of these, hopefully some of these will spark your interest. And if you didn't even know they existed, you could jump over and give them a try yourself. They all have Next Fest demos. I'm not sure if those demos are going to carry over after Next Fest. Sometimes they take the demos down after Next Fest is over. So if they're gone, I apologize. Keep an eye on the game either way, because these are all definitely going to be at least interesting games that are going to be what someone is looking for. And if you like this type of content and like listening to me talk, definitely make sure to subscribe and leave me a like. I'm new to this whole YouTube thing, so it will be much appreciated if you enjoyed this video. Bye-bye.